I think the Biden proposal, and I've thankfully I've done a good bit of reading of the proposal just because I've been working on the clean energy for Biden stuff, and I think it's got some really good targets in there. A lot of people are saying, there's the Green New Deal crowd, which I think is fantastic, and that's a huge proposal, and then there's kind of the more pared down versions of that, and Biden's plan, in my opinion, is a really good happy medium. I think the science says we need to be I'm not on the science end of things, I'm on the policy end of things. But my understanding is the science says we need to be at basically zero emissions by 2030, I think. So we got about 10 years to get there. My perspective from the work I do is that is just technologically almost impossible to do. I think it could be done, and there are ways we can do it, but I look at the Biden plan as like a really good place to start, and huge. I think it's a $2 trillion investment in his first term in clean energy is what he's trying to make, and I think that's a really big target that's going to push the industry in a really exciting direction, and kind of tap really deeply into their resources and really push them to the upper limits of what they're going to be able to do. So it's kind of an exciting first step, I think, and yeah, I think that's a good kind of middle ground that blends the really aggressive targets with something that I think is really manageable. And of course, the 2030 target that's really important. I mean, we can't just brush that aside and say that it's too hard to do, and that we can't get there. I think we need to try, but I also think that the plan that Biden's put out there is really a solid place to start.
You mentioned that we don't have the technology quite yet. Do you know what areas we need to do research on? Where should money be spent in research and development? So
I think I shouldn't have said we don't have the technology. I think we do have the technology. It's more the scale, if anything. It's we really need to think about scaling up. These industries are really, wind and solar have just come into their to becoming mainstream industries in the last year or two, really. I mean, like the advancements in cost over the last couple of years has been incredible. So it's not so much that we don't have the technology, it's that it needs to be done at a scale that we just haven't mastered yet. And that's global. That's a global scale. Obviously, this is a global problem. This isn't just a U.S. problem. So we've got to be thinking about it that way. And it's between wind and solar and battery storage. I mean, we do need big advances, and really, in battery storage is one area that we do need to be making more investments and shooting for the moon there, I think. But the basic technology is there. It's I would say it's mature. It's commercialized. Companies are building really big projects. New like literally every week I read a new article about the world's largest battery being installed. Like, it's just incrementally getting bigger and bigger and bigger on a very short time scale. So there's just scaling up is really the main factor.
Okay, that's good to hear. I do want to ask about market forces, though. So electric vehicles have been available for about 20 years, yet still about 10% or less than 10% of vehicles driven are electric. So it takes a long time for market forces to encourage people to go electric. What can the government do to speed up that transition?
Yeah, so I think I'll try and talk about this kind of both in the context of EVs and also in other technologies as well, because there's I think comparison there. But we've been subsidizing, or wind and solar have been subsidized for decades. I mean, I think particularly wind, the federal subsidies go back to the 90s. So the only way we're going to get these things fully adopted is through it's going to be a cost thing. It's going to come down to cost. So I'll compare this to kind of where solar and wind have come from. So this is the first year. 2020 is the first year, I believe, that, or maybe it was late 2019, that solar and wind energy became. It's actually cheaper to retire a coal plant and build new wind and solar from an energy perspective than it is to keep operating an existing coal plant. So lots of pieces are going to have to fall into place to reach this with electric vehicles. You know, we've got to build the infrastructure. We've got to build charging stations that are much more accessible to people. And the cost needs to come down. So we're slowly seeing EVs reach this point as battery costs come down. And the nice thing about that is the battery costs from in EVs will transfer over to, there's a lot of synergy there between electric vehicle batteries and like the large scale utility batteries as well. So those will come down together, and they're dropping, like, I don't know, a large number of percent every year. They're really coming down quickly, just like wind and solar did over the past few years. So yeah, I think for full adoption, as far as EVs go, to really overtake internal combustion engine vehicles, yeah, we need to get to cost parity, and I think we can get there through government incentives to purchase EVs. That's one really quick way to do it. That can be said for residential solar and batteries as well. You know, residential batteries are another aspect of this whole thing. Putting batteries into garages and such to charge cars off of, and actually put power back onto the grid. So yeah, we need to build new infrastructure, and you know, the way I see it is that Biden's plan does this. It pushes, it makes the right investments to really push the market in the right direction. So you know, whether you want to talk about, you know, whether it's totally free market capitalism or you're making government investments, I don't have a problem talking about either one. I think we need to be making big investments in this, but yeah, we'll get EVs in people's hands by increasing the industry's scale and bringing the costs down, which will, I think, create a virtuous cycle that moves us towards net zero emissions eventually. So yeah, it's a big long-term project that I think government is going to play a big role in. You know, these trillions of dollar investments from Biden are going to infuse a whole lot of cash into hopefully both people's hands, so they're able to purchase them, and also into the supply side of things, and make it and scale up production and that side of things as well.
How much of this is a federal issue, and what can local governments do?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, we've seen over the last 4 years, obviously, cities and some states have really taken the lead on climate. Obviously, the federal government has pretty much lacked any sort of leadership on the issue whatsoever. So we really need that national leadership back. I mean, like I said earlier, this is a global problem. We can't solve this as a country even, but you know, the U.S. still being one of the superpowers, if you want to say it that way, one of the most you know, not important, but most powerful countries that influences global policy in a lot of ways. We have a huge role to play on the global scale. So, and we just haven't been doing that. So, you know, cities can make local changes that kind of reinforce those same virtuous cycles I just kind of mentioned. You know, they've been able to, just like Utah enacted recently, HB 411, which allows cities to go to 100% renewable. I think by 2030 they can make agreements with Rocky Mountain Power now to do that. So that's one kind of example of what a city has been able to do. States have been able to go a little bit further. They can enact 100% clean standards and impose that on everyone, and that pushes 100% clean or 100% renewable. Even we've seen some states go 100% renewable. There's just a variation of what sort of targets people are or the different jurisdictions are pushing. So that's going to help with, you know, regional haze and air quality and those sorts of issues in kind of the more localized side of things that kind of go just above the city level, but below the federal level. But they don't really change anything at the global scale, which when we're talking about the climate crisis is what we really need to be focused on. So yeah, I think we need to focus on national leadership right now. That's what's going to kind of push us over over the hill, hopefully, of really tackling climate change. I think this is going to happen through regional cooperation, something that states are very, it's difficult to get states to play nice with each other a lot of the time. We've seen Utah and Wyoming are far behind our neighbors as far as renewable energy standards go, and that actually influences what businesses will come here. And so it ties into the whole economic picture. So we can't be picking winners and losers. We've got to make sure the federal government is kind of trying to spread these things around and create a regional environment, or a national environment that helps out, the entire regions. Enhanced cooperation just between jurisdictions, and this is kind of in like the regional markets picture, we call them. So regional electricity markets really allow different resources from different areas to kind of all be utilized by a larger grid across the region. So we're not, you're not limited to, like in Utah, we don't have to just rely on Utah solar. We've got to be able to expand beyond those boundaries and tie in with Wyoming wind and New Mexico wind and Arizona solar. And as we can connect all those things together, we really reduce the overhead of the amount of stuff we need to build from one perspective. So opening up those doors for markets and also transmission. I mean, just like the actual physical transmission lines that they're extremely difficult to build. They take 10 years plus to build a transmission project. That's a place where the federal government can really step in and do a huge amount for the utilities to incentivize transmission and to help those markets kind of to form. I think it's just about collaboration, and that's something the states don't always do on their own. We see them kind of battling against each other some of the times, and the federal government, with the right leadership, can come together and bring those resources that we need to really meet the global crisis that we're seeing.
I want to jump now to jobs. I talk to a lot of conservatives, my parents are conservative, and the broad view is that policies such as the Green New Deal are going to destroy jobs. We have a lot of people employed in coal mines and natural gas industry and stuff like that. Will jobs be destroyed in an effort to decarbonize America?
So I would say definitely not. I think there are going to be certain jobs that go away and that change, but on a level basis, I think whether you call it the Green New Deal or whether you want to talk about Biden's specific plan, they're both going to, I think, create a lot of jobs. They might not be in the exact areas or professions that people imagine. I think large scale renewables, like the big wind and solar plants that I typically work on, that the policy I work on is supporting. Those aren't going to replace the jobs involved in those. Are not going to replace the mining and operations and maintenance jobs at a coal plant per se. They're not going to replace that on a one-to-one basis. There are a number of operations jobs that to upkeep a wind or solar plant, but not to the level that we're seeing that you'd see at a natural gas or a coal plant. But they're going to create those specific projects are going to create construction jobs, obviously. So the amount of renewables that we need to build is gigantic. I mean, we're talking, if you're not familiar with technical terms, maybe this isn't a technical term, but gigawatts, like hundreds and thousands of megawatts of energy. These are, really big chunks of energy that we need to replace as we're retiring coal plants. And to be able to do that, it's going to take an incredible amount of construction over the next few years. So I think those are going to be pretty steady jobs that actually really tap into rural communities and do help replace some of those coal mining and operations jobs. But there are some other pieces to this. I think we need to establish financial mechanisms that support coal communities. One way to do this is something called securitization, which is where the remaining debt of a coal plant that's retiring is refinanced at a lower rate. And as the plant is retired, and the savings can be passed on, which can be in the millions of dollars when you're refinancing a 500 or a billion, 500 million or $1 billion coal plant, whatever they cost. When you're refinancing, you're saving a whole lot of money, and so utilities are able to do that, and states are able to play a role in that, and the federal government could certainly play a role in that. So you can save millions of dollars there, and then put that back into the communities that are being affected for worker retraining or retirement pension plans, that sort of stuff, and other community needs. I mean, this is going to be important for indigenous communities to be able to support those jobs that have been long relied on coal plants and coal mining to support. So there's lots of opportunities there. And one other kind of interesting piece is that a lot of the wind and solar that we build is probably going to be, it's easier to locate it near existing transmission lines. So hopefully we can keep some of those new investments in the same place that the retirements are being made, which keeps supporting those communities. So yeah, that's kind of one piece. The financial piece I think is really interesting, and states are starting to do that. And I don't think the federal government yet has really played a role in that, but I think that's one place where it certainly could. And then, I think one of the main places we're going to see lots of new jobs, like the bulk of I guess green economy or new economy jobs if we're really going to make these investments, it's going to be in things like energy efficiency and home installation. So these are really well-paying jobs. They've been some of the fastest growing jobs already in the entire country. If you look at like job growth percentages over the past couple of years. So they're already taken off. They require pretty little in the way of formal education. And they'll number in the hundreds of thousands, maybe the millions. I don't know the exact numbers on what they're looking at, but they'll involve building solar and storage in homes and communities, and identifying buildings that are operating inefficiently, fixing them to meet new standards. Buildings are right now one of the fastest growing sources of emissions, so that's a really important piece to tap into. I think Biden's plan really recognizes each of these different aspects and devotes resources to training and education to continue innovating and building on existing solutions. So many of these can be, great union jobs. They directly are going to lead us down a path toward decarbonization. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting blend. It's going to be, some of the big construction jobs out building large scale renewables, and I think a lot of energy efficiency and residential stuff where you're building solar on rooftops and installing new batteries, and there's probably some things I'm not thinking of, but it's a really bright future, I think, for the industry. And yeah, I think as a net we're gonna gain quite a few jobs out of this, and a lot of security there.
That's really good to hear. Thank you for your expertise. I want to open it up for audience questions, if there are any. If anyone wants to ask any questions. Someone in the chat says, where can I see an in-depth analysis of his climate policy positions? I mean, you can go to joebiden.com. He has his policies listed there. Do you have anything to say about that, Nate? Yeah, so there's the plan laid out. I think I probably have it open on my browser from some of the work I've been doing. Let me just see here. Yeah, joebiden.com/clean-energy will take you to that page directly. So he's got his team's got a very long plan laid out. I haven't been through every single piece of it, but it's good stuff. I think it'll do a lot for Utah. I don't know that I've seen. I would check out for like an actual analysis that breaks it down from maybe an objective standpoint. I don't know if I've seen one specifically, but I would check out like Vox.com. Dave Roberts is a journalist that does lots of really good climate work. I think he might have looked at it in a bit of depth, and you can probably find some links to it from there. So yeah, I think there's some good
journalism out there that's looked at it, and yeah, I would try and find some of that.
Awesome. Broderick?
So, I have a question. So, let me try and reformulate this. So it's great that we have a plan for reducing carbon emissions and making sure that we don't burn our planet to the ground. But there are a lot of people who have a really hard time accepting just this idea of climate change and cutting carbon emissions and things like that. What can I do to help people to recognize this as the problem that it is, and to recognize the pragmatism and the solutions being put forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I do work in Wyoming, which is they are they produce 40% of, well, they're the largest coal producer in the nation. They really don't want to give any of that up. They've had a really hard time thinking about the transition to renewables, and are really actively pushing back against it. And where I see and this is a little bit true in Arizona as well, where but we're really making some headway in Arizona, whereas Wyoming, we're really just being reactive instead of proactive at this point. So hopefully that'll switch. But I think the arguments I see that start to at least change some minds are really just economic centered. It's pretty easy for people to talk about the environmental benefits. We see them all around. We're seeing the wind event in Salt Lake this week, and the fires in California, and like a nightmare scene there. And I don't want to tie a single event to climate change, but I think the greater pattern is pretty obvious to a lot of people. But they don't always acknowledge it or want to put it out of their minds. And so I think the economic picture is what really can start to sell people. That's what I try to make in my work, is talking about that renewable energy is cheaper. It's cleaner. I mean, when you're not emitting all of that carbon dioxide and methane, not methane, all the other gases, NOx and all that stuff. You're saving a lot of money on healthcare and those costs as well. So I think just focusing on that, focusing on the potential jobs picture, and that we can reinvest in the same communities that are going to lose out on coal. There are going to be lots of opportunities there. I think that's one of the main sticking points, is when people in those communities hear that their coal plant, I mean, they think of these things personally. I mean, this is like the source of an entire community's income for a lot of these places. And so they hear that coal plant's closing, that's deeply personal and deeply hurtful. And so trying to talk about the potential benefits to that specific community, or in general those specific communities, is a big piece. And yeah, there's a lot of investments to be made, but I think a lot of the financial pieces are starting to fall into place. I've seen recent reports that are talking about the risks of climate change to the financial markets, and that actually came from a Trump commission. So that's going to be an interesting piece to watch. That I think came out yesterday, and so I'd like to see how people respond to that. But I think, yeah, those money arguments are what really start to make a dent with some of the more conservative people that hold those beliefs. So yeah, just talking about how renewables are cheaper, and how they are going to be able to create jobs in some of these same communities is going to be really important.
Any other questions?
And then a follow-up question to that same one, if I may. So in your work, have you seen encouraging progress in helping people to get on board with clean energy?
Yeah, so I've been in this particular job for a few months. So basically, going back to the beginning of the pandemic is about the time I started this position, and so I can't say that I have seen a lot of personal change, because I haven't been out, unfortunately, being able to talk to people in Wyoming and stuff. But on a policy level, I do, I think in the best example I have right now is Arizona. Arizona obviously has been a traditionally pretty conservative state, and we've been hammering the economic arguments there for the entire. That's been probably one of the main pieces I've worked on in the last 6 months. Is really they've been talking about adopting much higher renewable energy standards than they've had, going all the way up to 100% clean energy standard by 2050, I think. And so, and the reason the impacts I see pushing that argument along are all like cost and financial arguments. So I think I think it is happening. People are, they just need to see it repeated and kind of from some different perspectives. I've worked with a number of kind of conservative leaning conservation groups. There are a few of those, believe it or not, that are doing some really good work. Groups like the Western Way and let's see, I think it's Conservatives for Responsible Stewardship are doing good work, and also pushing that stuff along. So yeah, it takes a coalition. It takes diverse perspectives and trying to find people you might not agree with on everything, and trying to find that one piece of agreement and using that as a jumping off point to reach some new people. So yeah, I think it is working. It is, in Utah, I see it happening as well with what was it called? The roadmap that they put out, the Gardner Policy Institute put out earlier this year. They put out a really great roadmap that talked a lot about air quality. And then Utah Clean Energy is a great organization, based here in Salt Lake. They are coming out with like a coalition. I forget what they're calling it. It's a pretty new project, but they're modeling it after I think it was called the Utah Compact a few years ago on immigration. That was like a really innovative thing for a conservative state to do, to come out and basically put a official document out saying like we're a state that welcomes refugees and immigrants, and so they're trying to model a kind of a path towards clean energy off of that. And so I think those initiatives are going to be important. And yeah, I think it'll be. I think Biden is a good person to tie it all back to why we're here. I think Biden has a track record of doing a lot of that kind of bipartisan work, and I think we'll see that filter down.
Thank you.